Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tarot and Attachment. My name is Erin Smith, and I am a professional tarot reader and an associate marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And I'm coming on today to do the weekly reading to check into themes, archetypal expressions, mostly really like take a look at what's going on in the world through the lens of tarot to gain some insight into what types of situations we might expect to meet both in our daily lives and in the lives of the collective. There's a lot going on. I'm feeling particularly heartened by the great show of protest that happened yesterday across every state in the country. People coming together to support one another and oppose injustice and tyranny makes me feel good. I'm happy to see it. I mean, of course, there's a lot more going on that is distressing, but it feels hopeful that so many people took the time and the energy and set aside fears and stressors to come together and use their voices to say, we're not okay with this. We're not okay with what's going on. The militarization of the police and disappearing people off the streets. There's just a lot going on that's not okay. So I don't know. Let's see what the cards have to say about how things might unfold moving forward, at least for the next 7 days. So I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go silent. I'm going to concentrate while I shuffle, and I will be with you momentarily. I'm going to say a prayer of these cards. Hmm. Hmm. So it's kind of an interesting message because it is giving us a kind of perspective on how to handle things that are happening, both within ourselves and out in the world. Because really, what the cards are pointing to here is that wounds of the past are being brought up to be examined in the light of consciousness. And these are old wounds. This is not something that is just occurring in the collective presently, but it's tied to causes and conditions that came before. And yet, even as we are confronting our shadow, the repercussions of actions taken that caused harm or pain to others, we are also being called to not get stuck in the past, to respond to our present from this place of understanding, cultivating a new understanding about where we've come from and where it is that we want to go from here in order to create a more prosperous collective experience for the whole. And what new actions we can take to move in that direction. So here we have the moon, and the moon is really about things that we keep hidden from ourselves, things that are too painful or too uncomfortable to look at in the light of day, and so it gets buried in the unconscious. We try to disown it, to get around it. We don't want to confront it or look at it. And in the suppression of this awareness, it comes out in really unhealthy ways. And so, kind of what immediately comes to mind is that even though this is an incredibly potent experience of suppression, what we're looking at right now with the current administration, this is not so new to the United States, that the United States was founded on a kind of tyranny of taking land from the people who occupied this country before we settled it. And of course, looking at how we have an economy in this country that was largely built on slavery in the earliest days of the founding of this country. These are uncomfortable truths. These are things that people don't typically like to talk about for many reasons. Some is related to the fact that there's a considerable amount of racism that continues to go on in this country. And so drawing attention to that doesn't make those people comfortable. But I think there's also a considerable amount of shame and remorse for people who know that that is a collective history that we hold. And how do we write something that was so, with the magnitude of pain? How do we write that today in this day and age? And some of it is just to, again, be willing to hold it in our conscious awareness, to not look away at the ugliness of it, the pain of it, to listen to the residual struggle and suffering of the generations of people who were traumatized by these conditions and these systems, to hold compassion in our hearts and to, again, just be willing to confront the shadow. There's a phrase in recovery: that which we resist persists. Or, those who would forget history are doomed to repeat it. These phrases are pointing to something that's really important for us to embrace right now. And that is that we don't find ourselves in a situation of tyranny for no reason. That these inequitable structures, these structures of our economy, of capitalism, that where a few people amass great wealth off the backs of others, we have to start looking at this and understanding that this is sort of the underlying root cause of a lot of the tyranny and suppression and oligarchy that we're seeing and experiencing in our country right now. And so the other thing I like to say about the moon is that the moon is an invitation for deep healing. When we are willing to be with the shadow and not turn away in disgust, in revulsion, when we are willing to open up and see this cause and effect reality, and are willing to open our hearts compassionately to why this is coming up to be seen now, then there is an opportunity for transmutation. Temperance is the alchemist card. And alchemy, was the 14th century science of transmuting base metals into gold. And really, this is a metaphor for taking the corrupted or toxic elements and distilling them down, removing the impurities, so that we can get to the essence, to the heart of something, and bring the elements back together in a holistic way that is bigger than the sum of its parts to achieve gold. It's transmuting our pain into enlightenment through balance, through this recombination. And so it is the antithesis of breaking things apart and having those forces be in opposition. It is about understanding that these elements formulate a whole system. And again, this idea that when we are in a state of balance, when we are holding the tension of opposites and cultivating this kind of non-dual perspective, that our ideas, our perspective, they can be transformed. The way that we interact with one another can be distilled and transformed, that there's a possibility for coming together in more effective and supportive ways. And so sort of the guiding light, or the hope that we are seeking to fulfill on the horizon is one of great abundance, where each person has what they need in order to thrive, that each person's needs are provided for in a good way. And again, this is also, let's extend this vision even farther out, caring for the very earth itself. that when we care for the earth, she provides for us exponentially. That if we become good stewards of the earth and caretakers of one another, that there is a great abundance that can be had by all, and that this is like a gift from God. It's a divine download, if you will, this idea that there's enough for everybody. And that we can re-envision the systems that we find ourselves in that are hierarchical, that create false scarcities, that are built on slavery, and that each person's needs could be provided for. And in order to do that, what is required of us is to understand the past from which we come and to stop fighting that, but set our sights on how we might like to move forward in a new way. So the way that I usually describe the Seven of Wands is that, you know, we've come through significant challenges, that things have not been easy, and we've had to be resilient in the face of these challenges. That we had to be like warriors. And, you know, in many cases, we have to continue to hold firm in our values and our beliefs and stand in our ethical sense of what is good for the planet and good for one another. But this card is also pointing to something that we know to be true, or as a, you know, therapist, it's something that I understand deeply from working with clients and looking at the research, that when you come from trauma, you hold that trauma in your central nervous system, that you can become hypervigilant, that you want to be intentional about how you're wielding your power and what battles you are fighting. Because if you're always poised for battle, if you're always on the brink of war, then there's no ability to come to feel safe enough to come together in a good way and be wise in our methods, right? So like, it's just a biological fact that when your amygdala is engaged, and amygdala is the part of the brain that's responsible for fight or flight. Again, when you have had significant trauma, it's immediate. It's a hair trigger. When it gets triggered, you are activated and you are in this, you're poised for battle. And when the amygdala is engaged, your prefrontal cortex goes offline. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for wise decision making. It is, and it re-engages when your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and you feel safe enough to cycle down and breathe, stand firmly on the ground. Right? Feel the feet, feel the ground underneath your feet. That this feeling of stability gives you the ability to know how to wield your energy or your power in a good way. And then there's also just this indication that we have to be willing to do something different, something new. We have to formulate a new vision or a new way to engage the world, that the structures that we have previously built have some, they're problematic in many ways. And so there's a kind of innocence or humility to page energy. Pages represent new beginnings, new opportunities, new people, new environments, new political movements, new economic structures, new ways of doing and being in the world. Because of course, we're talking about wand energy, which is life force energy. And again, there's a kind of humility to being in a position where you don't have all the answers. You don't know exactly how everything is going to shake out, that you set an intention and you move towards it, but you have to have this ability to explore the possibilities without having all the answers. And in the doing, in the exploring, we gain new insight, new information. We can make adjustments along the way. Pages are childlike. And this kind of childlike quality of following our curiosity, allowing our sense of goodness to draw us forward, and being really open to gaining insight and taking action, but also having the humility to have multiple people come together and offer their view. We as individuals can't have all the answers, that there is something powerful that happens when people come together as a collective, that the combination of these perspectives creates a kind of vision, again, that is bigger than the sum of its parts. And that's very much being pointed to here, this idea that when we come together in good faith, with in an open-hearted way, with compassion and respect for one another, really what, the Six of Cups is, it's a kind of unconditional love. It's loving like before you've ever had your heart broken. It's loving with an unguarded heart, which is not easy when you have been wounded deeply by life. Choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to give of yourself authentically for the sake of cultivating healthy reciprocal relationships, that this is a great act of courage. And it invites others to show up in a similar way, that there is this beautiful expression of reciprocity that is being exhibited through the imagery of the Six of Cups. And again, it's sort of like, how can we envision a world where economic security is integrally connected to ethics and love and heartfelt expression? How is it that we can unify these two things? It's, almost hard to imagine when we live in a world where people who have more money than they could ever use in 10 lifetimes want to have tax breaks so that the burden of responsibility to repair roads and to pay for public schools, and everything that we enjoy as a collective society, that burden falls on people who are struggling terribly just to survive. This level of inequality is not heart-centered. What would happen if we didn't disconnect these two things? Money and compassion. What if these two things could come together in a new way? That we could find ways of taking care of our health, our bodies, the planet. What if we could find ways to provide housing and food and healthcare for people and do this in a heart-centered way? What would that society look like? And what actions might we be motivated to take in order to move us in that direction? What new vision might come to mind in order to facilitate this vision of abundance for all, health of body, spirit, planet. And again, it means that we have to confront the wounds of the past and take some responsibility and do some work to heal from those wounds so that we are operating wisely, that we are not acting out of hypervigilance, but instead being guided by love. The message is to transcend the old way. So that is the message that we are receiving from the cards, and I'm happy to have it. It sounds good to me. And on that note, I wish you all so many blessings and so much love, and take care of yourselves and each other.